Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Goals Podcast. I'm Dawn, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. This podcast is dedicated to bringing people's stories to light and hearing their journeys of inspiration and self-growth. But it's also about connection and knowing that you are not alone. Each week, I get the chance to sit down and talk with an amazing soul, someone I've had the blessing of either meeting or following in my life. I am so grateful for my guests. Their openness and their vulnerability, it is unmatched as we share heartfelt conversations together about both their challenges and their triumphs. I hope that you can grab some inspiration and connection from my guests and their stories. I know I certainly have with each conversation. What an honor to sit with these brave souls. Everyone has a story, folks. And every story matters. Hey everybody, Dawn here at the Soul Goals Podcast, and I am so pleased to tell you that we've made it 1 full year of the podcast. And do you know what that means? It means 52 weeks, right? It means 52 beautiful, amazing souls have decided to share their stories with us. Stories I know you've heard over the past year of their challenge, of their overcoming obstacles, of their faith, of their vulnerability. Because golly, what kind of vulnerability does it take to really share those deepest, most internal parts of ourselves that are really, really challenging? We all struggle. Everybody does. And my guests have so lovingly decided to share pieces of themselves in an effort to show us that we matter, right? And that we can all struggle, but that we can all dive in and do the work and get to the other side because we've all survived 100% of our days, right? And we have. Struggle comes and goes, just like good times come and go. Nothing ever lasts, right? But it's how we navigate them. So my guests over this past year have just, like I said, shared so graciously and lovingly of themselves. I am so thankful for them coming on and bearing their stories to all of us in that effort to connect us, in that effort to show us that our stuff, our struggles, we're all relatable. We're all connected in that capacity. I think if I look back over the past 52 weeks of these awesome stories, these awesome talks that everyone has given us, there are some common threads that run really through 99.9% of them. One of them is the community and support and accepting support while they were in the middle of it to get through it. Monumental. Absolutely could not have done it without that support. And I think a lot of times for us, when we are struggling and we do need to ask for help, it can be really hard to do that, hard to reach out. But my guests have shared that when you do reach out, when you accept that help, that support, that community rallying around you, it makes the difference in getting from one side of the river to the other side of the river. And finding your way through the weeds, that support, that community. Another thing that was a big deal that ran through a lot of the interviews was the concept of choice and how we all have a choice. Like we can sit in our stuff and just be there. And sometimes you got to sit there, you got to feel it, but then you have to go through it to grow through it. Yeah, you have to go through it to grow through it. And part of doing that is making a concerted effort by choosing sometimes not the most popular fork in the road. I know you know what I'm talking about. My guests can definitely fill you in on that more. If you missed some of the episodes, I'd love for you to go back and check them out because, like I said, that seems to be a big, big piece. The third really, really big piece for everybody across the board was their faith and what that meant to them in their process, in their struggle, in their challenge, and how they couldn't have gotten through what they did without that. They simply couldn't. It just was that integral. And that when you are in those dark places and you just feel like even with support, you don't have a lot going for you, you always have that piece of faith. Yeah, you always have your God. You always have that beautiful, beautiful testament to something larger than ourselves, something that we can connect to that is always there for us and literally always has our back. Right. So, what's coming up next, guys? Year 2? Yes, it's starting up in just a couple of weeks. It's a fresh spin on the soul goals, and I can't wait to share more details about that with you in our first episode. But suffice it to say, I'm going to give you a little bit right here. I'm going to have a co-host with me for this next season. I am pumped to share this wonderful lady with everybody. And like I said, coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll start releasing those awesome episodes. And I'm telling you, you don't want to miss it. It's going to be some good stuff. Some really nice things on how to grow more in our faith, how to grow more through our process, how to manage our process, how to maneuver our way through and navigate by diving deeper into what makes us tick and how we can help ourselves be the best version of ourselves. Right? So more on that as October rolls in here. But for now, I want to say thank you to everyone who has listened, who has given beautiful, vulnerable, and amazing feedback on the shows and on the episodes, all of the subscriptions as well. So great. Thank you also for passing these episodes along to people that you feel need a little boost of hope, right? Or that could really resonate with the message that week was shared. So without you, there wouldn't be a podcast. I appreciate it again from the bottom of my heart. Huge thanks to all 52 of my guests for sharing so openly and honestly. Again, wouldn't be a podcast without them. Yeah, I really am here to say that those stories have done a beautiful job of shaping and shifting some things in my own life. So without it, I wouldn't be where I'm at. Thank you to everybody for that. But for now, let's wrap it up and let's go back and let's revisit a few highlights from some of our 52 guests over the past year. And let's just check in and hear about their stories. Because what do we always say? Yeah, we all have a story and every story matters. Okay, I'm going to say it again so you hear it again. Everyone has a story and every story matters.
That this trying to sleep was just terrible. And that is when it was spiritual warfare is the only thing that I can really label it. But it was not thoughts of mine. It was just very dark. You know, you're doing this to your family. You're doing this to Clara. You know, should you even be here? Should you even survive the night? Like, is it like it was really, really hard. And I had never had that kind of just dark, grim thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so the day and Brad is just, he is warm and he is solid and he is we're not going to worry about something until we have to worry about it person. Yeah. And what it takes for him to worry is just a mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was so glad that he was there. Right. And he really got me through that. But it was the nighttime stuff that was really, really hard. And when I finally started sleeping through it, that's when life got better.
Yeah. Yeah. The spiritual warfare is a big thing. I know my other guests have talked about that feeling of what did I do to have this come upon me? Mm-hmm. What's the reason? And then the anger that comes along with it, that goes with that same thought process. Right. And then you're like, but I shouldn't be angry. So it's that internal conflict that you're going through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you take on top of that, you're not sleeping.
Yeah.
And that just throws throws it into a huge tailspin.
Right. Yeah. So really, I mean, and you hear that often that the diagnosis is the hardest part. And once you have a treatment plan,
yeah.
And it is, I mean, it's like, just the unknown is always, the scariest part. And I think that just when you go through something like this, you realize your humanness more than you ever have. You realize that we're fragile and we don't know. Those are the two things you're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
that you just have to, you know.
Fragile and we don't know. And I get that to your point. Yeah, the unknown is in anything, but then you're facing something so big that
Mhm.
just was dropped in your lap. And
Right.
yeah.
Flew to Providencia to get our passport stamped there. And then we flew to St. Lawrence Island in the United States to get our American passport stamped. And then
Okay.
from there, we flew towards Nome.
Okay.
And about 40 miles from Nome is when we lost our first engine
Yeah.
on this twin engine plane. And they radioed in and told them we were having fuel problems.
Mm.
And they finally, he was switching over to reserve tanks, but they looked low also.
Mm.
And then 27 miles from Nome, we lost the second engine. And when you lose two engines of a twin engine plane, it gets real quiet up there.
Yeah.
And we just floated down and we pulled together. Brian turned around for the co-pilot seat and said, we're going to have to land on the ocean. We're going to get as close as we can to that island up there. We're going to bust out. We're going to grab the cans. We had some empty 5-gallon gas cans with us. He said, we're going to grab the cans. We're going to float. They know where we are. They're coming to get us. Everybody keep praying.
Okay.
And that's
so
what we
he
did.
had radioed.
So
they
had
knew.
radioed ahead and said, well, I just lost all my fuel. And so as they went down, they lost radar contact then.
Yeah.
But there was a chance sighting by another plane in the air that thought he saw us in the water, our plane hitting the water. And he thought it was a whale. But then he got a call from Anchorage because they saw him in the area. And they said, would you investigate? So he turned around, he came back, and he saw us. He spotted us.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, there is wreckage, and there are survivors. There are people floating.
Oh,
So a second plane came and started circling around us. And they radioed about helicopters. They got a couple of survey helicopters that ended up coming out.
Yeah.
And they weren't with the hoist or the basket or anything. They just had rails along the side. And
they
so
weren't
when
made for that. They were survey helicopters.
Yeah. So when they went down, they had to go down to the water level and then go up and down with the waves, which were 3 to 6 foot high.
Done.
So there was no smooth place to land it. There's no smooth place to pick these people up. He just had to go up and down, and he did it. And this guy was an ex-Vietnam helicopter pilot.
Wow.
And a wonderful person, and just came down. Then the other survey guy, he came down, he got one person, and they took us all up to Sledge Island. That's when they took us back. So we were in the water anywhere from 35 to 70 minutes. I was in 55. I was the fifth person to be rescued. And we found out later that the life expectancy in that water is about 8 to 13 minutes before you die of hypothermia. So we were in at 35 to 70 minutes. Even the next day, when we were in the airport, we flew back the next morning.
That's just crazy to me.
I know, that's me too.
But
we wanted to get back home. 3 of us flew out the next morning, 12, 13 hours after the crash.
Wow.
And flew on Alaska Airlines back home. And the state police wanted to interview us in the airport and to find out just how we survived. And one of the things was the gas cans that we held. We were taking them back, get filled up with fuel for our other planes back in Russia. And so we used those to float with. And with those cans, most people laid on top of the cans, so they laid on the surface of the water.
Okay.
Which, if you're going to have any warm water, it's going to be right on the surface.
Yeah.
With a life jacket, which we didn't have any life jackets. With a life jacket, no, we didn't have any life jackets.
What?
You're not required to have them on these small private planes.
Oh,
I know it's dumb.
goodness.
Yeah, I know it feels like that 30 years later, but back then we're rugged, tough guys.
Well, when I read about using the gas cans as flotations, that made just sense. It's with the wreckage, it's with the plane.
Yeah.
But I thought you all would have there were no life jackets.
No life jackets, no boat, no inflatable raft or anything. It was just holding on to the gas cans. And what we did was most people laid on top of the cans. So we laid on the surface of the water, and that's where the warm water is. And if you're in a life jacket, you're up to the water, up to your neck in the water, and then your heart's down below the surface, and your feet are down where it's really cold.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, up there, they call life jackets body markers.
Oh,
Thank you for wearing that, so we can know where to pick you up. Yeah.
Wow.
Because the firefighter had never pulled out a live person before. Actually, when he came out, this is so cool to say now. The firefighter brought with him 7 body bags.
Don.
No, because he'd never pulled out a live person before. So, I mean, this is why I say this is a great story.
It is.
You need
It's
to get this book, people.
everybody rush to get this. You'll read it like in a snap.
Send me an email. I'll send you a book. I'll ask you for a donation. So if you got $5 or if you got 5,000, that would be good too.
Yeah.
But if you got $5, send it to me. Pay for the cost of the printing. But send me an email at donwharton@comcast.net.
We will advertise the
I'll advertise here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know this story. The story speaks to people still 30 years later. It still speaks to people.
Like, I think you're always winging it. I think we're always trying to figure it out as we go. I think that's just part of the process, because if we knew everything, either one, it would scare us shitless. I wouldn't do it. We would be like, peace out, I'm done. Or if we knew it, we would be like, jump in and we know too much and there's no spontaneity and there's no, like spontaneity is a great thing. You know, I think it's how we learn about ourselves as well, right? Totally. The challenges that we have to dig in and go, okay, got myself in that one, got to figure that one out. All right. But if I would have known that, then I would have planned ahead and all that stuff. So
right. And then that I feel like you're exactly right. I feel like it'd just be boring, you know, like if everyone knew, you know, and this is something I remind myself too, because like with anything, like life's a roller coaster, you know, you go through the ups and downs, and it's like, we have the choice when we go to the downs to just stay down there and sulk in on it. But like understanding that and trusting the process of like, you know, not knowing is like one thing I, you know, question myself is like, you know what, enjoying this process of getting to where you're going to be and just believing that you're going to get there, you will get there, right? You need to put in the work. You need to put in the time, the effort and energy, and trust the process. Cause like you can get tangled with it's not working, and then before you know it, it's not working, you know. So you can listen to people say this, people say that. I know parents mean the best, but number one thing is, like we said earlier, you only you got to know, you know. You show them, you know, and once you show them, then they like, oh, then they'll understand, you know.
I get it. Yeah. And I think you speak to that whole trusting the process. I think that's the hardest part. I think the elbow grease that people put into it and the bordering on obsession of doing so much for your craft, whatever that is, and knowing that this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, they got that down pat because that's predictable. But then you go into this whole, I got to just let it go and trust it's going to happen. Oh, like that's what can drive people crazy. And that's where a lot of people can step off the train. But I do know one thing about you is that you've always been that trusting the process part. Like it's always been a piece of you. How do you do that? Like, how do you just choose that, allow that?
You know, it's just something deep within, you know, it's really something I can't like write out, more than just like being in touch with your inner self and your intuition and like knowing that there's something bigger and better next, you know, or like this is coming. I don't know how. I know I'm going to be there. I write my goals down and they might not hit right where I want them to, but they're going to get fucking close, you know, like, or if it's not the thing that God or whoever you believe in is going to be right then and there. Like if that's the whole process, then like, you know, only you know, only you know, and trusting that, you know, that the feeling is inside and it's got to be put out. And a lot of people are kind of scared to like be vulnerable like that, you know, and
that's the word. Yes. Scared to be vulnerable enough to be like, okay.
To fail, really, you know.
We had good faith. Like we still do have great faith. Like that was really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Going to church and staying and still, it's funny that you said life is still going by, because I remember one time crying going to chemo, and I'm like watching people drive by, because you can't drive by yourself. So you have to go with somebody. And it's like, life is still moving.
Yeah.
And like, I'm going through this, but life is still going on. And I just like sat and like stared, like people are still living life. Like life doesn't stop because you got this. It was just like a hit me reality.
Yeah. It's a real moment. And it's a moment of your mortality, if you will.
Right. Right.
And just going and understanding that. And I think it's a really healthy way to look at it if I'm listening to you speak about it, because there are no, okay, what if this happened? What if we do this? What if we do this? And I understandably, for the first month or month and a half that before you were fully diagnosed, there were probably a lot of things that were going on that you were questioning and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do and where's the right place to go, and all the criteria to line that up. But, at the end of the day, wow, that's really powerful. Like seeing people move by you and understanding that you may be stopped for this moment, but everything else is continuing to flow.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. So tell me a little bit more about your, I know, because on Instagram, when you talk about it in different anniversaries of it, you don't capitalize the word cancer.
Oh yeah, we're not. So the girls, they started it. You can't say cancer in the house, or you got to do 10 push-ups.
Oh my God, I love that.
Do it. So we catch ourselves saying the C.
The C. Okay. Yeah. And we don't make it a big thing.
We don't make it a big thing.
Yes.
Except to do those push-ups.
unless we're doing multiple push-ups. How many, okay, so that was their idea to do that?
Yeah, I forget how it came about, but yes, they came up with that. I think it might have started with burpees and then transferred over to push-ups. Who knows?
How many push-ups have you had to do in the past?
A lot. I just had to do it the other day.
You
10
did?
push-ups.
Or do they call you and they're like, Mom?
Yeah, they look like push-ups.
They just give you that look like, I got you. Oh, you think that your willpower was something that was one of the dominant things that helped you get back to where you are now?
I think my willpower is just it's from my mom.
Okay.
And it is what, as well as Christy and all the people with Carrying Bridge and all that stuff. I mean, I didn't really know the Carrying Bridge was going on.
Yeah.
Until I got home. But everybody that sent me messages, that gave me support, that's what pulled me up.
I believe that. He was so encouraged. And I would just read him message after message after message at night when he was in the bed. I would just read it to him. Even though I didn't think he was fully grasping it, it meant so much. It meant so much to us as a family. Sure. The support, I will never again overlook, like when somebody, so often people can say, oh, I'm praying for you. Let me tell you something. There's something about typing those words out, and there's something about actually really doing it. I think it was prayer.
I think I've had numerous people tell me that I'm like the miracle.
You are.
Yes.
And
yeah, you are.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
I mean, she really thinks that I am.
He is.
And you know what? For each one of those people, I just look at them and say, I couldn't have done it without the support. I don't think I would have had the will.
Yeah. That community rallying and just coming together to lift you up.
Right.
It's a big thing. I think a lot of times that we just don't allow that, or we don't understand. I think that's a really interesting that you said, Chrissy, like that you don't really comprehend it until you're in it. And then when it's happening, when the heart of people that comes out is so invaluable to where you are and to the whole process. Yeah. That just gives a whole Yeah. That speaks volumes to the people around you.
Just the ways that you show up. I never want to miss an opportunity to show up for somebody who is going through anything similar to what we went through.
Yeah.
Because it carried our family.
Yeah.
Those people carried our family, the meals, the prayers, the cards, all the things. It was such a reminder of how loved we are. Phil is. We needed that. We needed to, I needed to be loved on.
Right.
And the support was wonderful. So I think that's a key element right here.
Tell me about your process of that day in your thoughts and how you stayed as grounded as possible.
I was just kind of trying to stay in conversation with family, with friends. I would get up and take walks every now and then around the hospital, which is not the best place to be if you're wanting to like kind of remove yourself. You see a lot of sick kids. And it wasn't easy. I will say that it just wasn't easy. It was a really, really hard day. Having our family there was helpful because we would be, distracted by different people and, some friends that were there, just trying to do the best that they knew how. Nobody knew how to handle this. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. And everybody handled it as best that we all could. It was just having somebody there. We would sit there and we would just not talk for 30 minutes, but you felt comfortable because everybody was just feeling the same feelings at that day. We were nervous. I think that was a lot of the emotion that Pat and I felt, especially. I would get up and try to go be by myself for a minute, and I would just go cry. Like I would just say, "What is happening? What is going on?" And that was kind of the day. We'd get updates throughout that time of, this is what's going on at this point. We're at this part of her brain at this point, and we're closing up. And that was when we finally had heard that she was in recovery. I think we all were breathing.
Could take a deep breath.
Relief, because we were just so worried with where the tumor was located that the brainstem is, your heart rate, your breathing, and all your gross motor. It's like just a vital part.
Right.
And we were just so nervous that the biopsy would even leave her with deficits that would last a lifetime, that would be just, affect her quality of life. And that had me extremely, extremely nervous.
See, and I didn't even think about that. And I would imagine you as a nurse, that was a big part of it for you too, that you knew what could come of that.
Absolutely. Yes, it was. And trying to kind of push that aside and just put your faith and your trust in the doctors that are there for that job. But still, it doesn't mean that complications can't arise during these things, because they do. But hearing that she had come out of recovery, or she was in recovery, and things went well, and that she seemed to be, as she was, waking up and stuff, neurologically intact, and they were able to, eventually extubate her, and she could breathe on her own. And the sight of her after surgery was something that I feel like you can't be prepared for. Seeing your child and she was, the back of her head was cut open where they could reach her brainstem, and it was cut open from like almost midway through her skull all the way down her neck to the top of her shoulders. She had a very long incision.
Gosh.
And it was it just scared me.
Yeah. Is that incision still there that she?
Oh yeah,
can see? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She has a big scar there.
Well, I mean, I understand that recovery. How you have points where it's just like, I remember saying, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
Because this is my comfort zone, and this is what I've known for a handful of years. And this is me, because I had let it become my identity, consuming. And I mean, I struggled with doing what I knew was appropriate for my overall healing and health and wellness.
Right.
So
I think I was telling somebody earlier today, you have to really believe there's something outside the prison doors that would be worth you tolerating discomfort.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So I became I became more serious about my relationship with God. I became very determined to to get an internship and to get through college. And then, marrying Kevin has been incredible support. When he met me in college, I would like to tell you I was completely healed, but no one gets out of an eating disorder and that early in your recovery that you don't have some scars and rough spots. So I never, once the ball started rolling, I never thought this is not worth it, because I started experiencing life and I hadn't had life in, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
And it put wind in my sails.
Yeah.
With treating disorders, I have to say, because I'm passionate about it, I hear people talk about burnout, and I think there was a time when I struggled a bit towards the end of me keeping a lease over in Green Hills, and more about just the burden of that rent, and that's why I've gone virtual. But I love it so much, and I'm 68. I should be quote unquote retiring, but as long as God has people for me to see, I'm going to keep going. And I love, I present still and train other professionals, and I'm passionate about that. So I don't give up on people. I believe in full recovery, complete full recovery.
I have to say that even thinking about it now, that was the hardest thing, to actually speak those words of this is what's going on, was so hard.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing for me out of all of it.
Telling your kids or being able to just verbalize it.
Verbalizing it.
Yeah.
Because, there's a hierarchy of who knows what, when, and, it was hard.
Yeah. How, I know your you're super tight. How did they take the information? How did they rally with you?
So that was something that I learned, is that people will take the information the way you present it to them. Yeah. So if you present it in I'm not worried about this, positive attitude, your attitude dictates a lot.
Yes.
And, I think that was something that was beneficial to me. There's people that had to know immediately, like my mom and my daughter, because they were aware of what was going on. So I had to give them information almost immediately. After that, I paused for a minute, because I'm like, I need to process myself without just vomiting all over everybody. So once that happened and I processed everything, my boys it was hard to tell them, but I just I'm like, I'm not worried. It's going to be okay. I gave them the facts, and I was really positive. And, I'm sure that they had some thoughts and emotions, but they didn't burden me with that. And they were okay. They were helpful. Always, everybody was, always very considerate and helpful. And I know that's what, most people want to do when they hear something like this. Yeah.
And I think I want to go back to you saying it's how you present it, because I think with any diagnosis, any kind of news that could be life altering like this, and sharing it with the people that you're closest with is hard enough, as you explained, but then your attitude really dictates how it's taken around you and how it's lived around you. Does that make sense?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. It is.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever really had to deal with my anxiety, I think I've always been a naturally anxious person, was my freshman season of college. And thankfully, the person who really inspired me, her name's Coach P. She was my assistant coach, and she had a background in sports psychology. And so we had meetings as a team about like mental health and the importance of mental health on performance. And in my mind, I had always kept the two separate. I was like, well, I'm anxious, but that doesn't have anything to do with volleyball. Turns out that's everything to do with volleyball.
It's got everything.
So,
Yes.
Everything to do with it. And so she was the first person I think I felt comfortable speaking up when I was struggling. The freshman year was definitely a battle for me because I struggled hard with not putting my identity and who I am in my performance. And so I took it so personally whenever I had a bad game or a bad day, and that really affected my confidence and my self-esteem and how I felt about myself.
Yes.
But she really worked with me to speak up about those feelings, and speaking up about me feeling that way was the only way it started to get better. So
yeah, you have to verbalize it and you have to bring it out of its shell.
Yeah, you have to. And also, the more you talk about it, the more you realize the girl beside you is probably dealing with the same thing. And when you're bold enough and vulnerable enough to speak up, it makes other girls on your team comfortable too.
Yeah. So once you started bringing that kind of out of the box, what was your experience? Did you feel better? Was it, or what? Like, I'm sure there probably were hard points that were like, oh my God, this is challenging. I thought this was going to be easier once I started speaking about my anxiety and working through it.
Yeah. So actually, the first time I think I ever really spoke about it, I didn't want to, which is funny. So my assistant coach, I don't even remember the circumstances of what happened, but there was one game and I was not having a great day. And so I got pulled out of the lineup and I got really emotional about that. Like, I thought I was, not a good athlete. All these self-doubt questions start to flood in when in reality, it wasn't personal, And after that day, I kind of had a breakdown and I felt like I'm not supposed to be here. Like, what am I doing? And I was in the car driving to get food, trying to take my mind off of it. And Coach P, my assistant coach, called me and she was like, we need to talk because I can tell that something's up with you and that you're wearing your emotions on your sleeve and like you have stuff that you're not expressing and you're bottling that up. And I cried on the phone with her and I told her, like, thank you for noticing that. And you're so right. Like, I do need to deal with that. And after that conversation, I really felt a weight off my shoulders. And I felt like I was able to show up to practice and play freely. And if I had a bad day, I could honestly laugh about it sometimes. And it wasn't the end of the world. So.
Yeah. What a gift she gave you.
What a gift. Yeah.
Yeah.
My story, I really kind of had like one of those build up to a breakdown moment. So as we've kind of talked about, right, I was 120% in on golf. And because I was working so hard, subconsciously, I started to relate my identity to my athletic performance, right? Because, okay, I'm spending so much time doing this. I care so much about it. It's a huge part of who I was that it became all of who I was, right? So when I was playing well, all things were great because, all right, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm competing how I'm supposed to be competing. Like, I was playing the best golf of my career. Like, of course, everything's going to be okay. But then the flip side, right? It's not always going to be perfect all the time. It got to a point where it was like, okay, this is all that I'm devoting myself to, right? And I wasn't playing very good. So I remember it very clearly. It was like, okay, this is who I am, and like I'm failing at that. So I became that failure essentially, and it was weighing on me really, really hard. I am typically very even keeled with my emotions. I'm never too up, never too down, but very kind of intense, like kind of on an internal level. That's where I get that kind of competitor, kind of killer instinct. But I started to become very emotional on the golf course, right? I mean, I'm never one to really let my words get away from me or that like my actions get away from me. And I remember that semester, it was my fourth year. I really was not having fun on the golf course. I was kind of going out there, just wasn't in a really good headspace, which made it impossible to play good golf. But there was one morning clearly where I was just sitting in my car and I was like so upset with everything that was going on. I sat like I just like kind of broke down. I just lost it. Like I was throwing water bottles in my car. I was like punching the walls and like punching the steering wheel. Like I'm sitting in the driveway of my house and just absolutely losing it. Just like one of those rock bottom moments. Like, okay, something's obviously wrong.
Sure.
And I'm really grateful that I have a great support system. That is a huge part of my story now, where my parents flew out that day. I actually I left school and left golf for a week and a half to go back home to find myself a little bit, to kind of just, I needed some time away. But that was really my mental health story, because I had never really prioritized that. I had never prioritized my mental state. I was very cookie cutter, stereotypical student athlete, right? We'd sit down and have hey, your mental health is important at the beginning of every single year. But in the back of my mind, I'm I'm not going to need that. It's
not me.
Doesn't relate to me. I'm going to be the one who that it doesn't matter. I got humbled very quickly from that. But a huge part of that now is me giving back. And we talked about the podcast now and being more vulnerable, especially when it comes to men's mental health. It's something that we strive for, but that's really my mental health story, where it kind of took a breakdown for me to build back up, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? You don't have to wait for the world to fall apart to just start building it back up in that sense.
Right. Do you feel that that's what usually happens with people, is they hit that bottom?
I do. I think especially with student athletes is that we fake it to ourselves and be like, okay, I still have it under control. Right? Student athletes are we're control freaks when it comes down to it. We control what we control, and we control it well.
Yeah.
But when we become the thing that's out of control, that becomes super difficult.
Yes.
Right? Because it's I can control how I play on the golf course, but if I can't control myself,
that
outside of it, correct. It's that's when, okay, nothing else really matters. You got to take some time to really get yourself in line there.
As you said, it really does all start with faith, and the accident itself was a big shaker in all of our faith. I mean, just how could something so tragic, and unfortunately here many are oftentimes about stories like this, things that we never think are going to happen to us.
Yeah.
And that is a big question that was in my mind and in many people's minds, of how could God allow something like this to happen? Losing my father, and Elliot losing his girlfriend Hollis, who was an absolute angel on earth.
Yeah.
And how could this happen to our family? We were on our way to church on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve, yeah.
And it makes a big question mark, many questions during that time we have to go back to our faith and what we truly believe. It tests your faith. And I've gone out, I've given speeches and talked to people, and I've always tried to make a point of making sure people realize that this isn't a process that happened easily at all. It was not something that I relied on my faith and I just got through it and I'm good the whole way through. It was a roller coaster. It was ups and downs.
Yeah.
And it was constant questioning and looking for signs, looking for God. And that is that foundation, that hitting rock bottom, that holding on to that is what pulled us through that, what pulled us up in those bad days. And particularly for me, dealing with my ongoing physical challenges and disability that was constantly in my mind. But I will say far and above the hardest challenge we had was dealing with that loss. And when I go give speeches, that is the number one thing that people talk about, whether you lose a loved one too early and too young in life, which is a horrible thing, or losing someone late in life, someone that may be a grandparent that was inevitable. Maybe they lived a long, prosperous life at 90, and it's still such a difficult thing to not have that person with you anymore. And
it leaves a hole. It leaves a hole there.
It does. And it's in that grief, I heard a quote recently that grief is that ungiven love that we have, that we weren't able to share. And that's why it's so painful. And we should appreciate the fact that we love someone. I think that was Andrew Garfield I saw on a talk show, and he said he loves talking about his mother. And if he gets emotional, it's because he had so much more love to give and he wasn't able to. And I really appreciate that perspective from it, because if we weren't grieving, then the person may not have been as important to us. And if we were sad, the person wouldn't want us to grieve in a sad, depressing way.
Right.
They'd want us to remember with a smile, which I think is what our family really has been able to do, is that we don't avoid that. We don't avoid talking about it, even when it is difficult to talk about the situation. We mostly talk about those good times and how blessed we were to have the people we've lost in our lives. And with that accident, I will say that God has, that's what's made it so compelling, is even from my perspective, all of the things that came together following that accident to getting me where I am in life and where our family is in life is really a credit to God writing that story. And I always tell people that I don't ever buy into the thought that God's like, I need to have this accident happen and put him through this difficult thing to show this. I think those bad things happen, but if we're willing and able to, give God control of those situations, that he can turn that into a beautiful story in a place that doesn't seem to have any particularly joyful ending in sight.
Yes.
But he's able to weave those things together for us and for his glory. And he certainly has, with us.
And it got really bad in probably Q1 of 2019. My speaking business was starting to grow, but slow. And I remember going through about a 2.5, 3 month stretch where I skipped my paycheck to make sure the people I had on salary could still get paid because our sales were dropping off the cliff. And there was one specific day I'll never forget. My Amex bill couldn't get paid. And it was one of those where you got to pay it at the end of every month. And it was like, hey, we're not going to add on fees. It's like, you have to pay. And I remember my wife coming home and I'm like in tears because I'm not the guy who fails at this stuff. And she thinks I have testicular cancer. She thinks I'm about to tell her cancer.
It's like something's really bad here.
And I was like, no, I just can't pay this bill. And she starts laughing and she's like, oh, my prior life, like I've had that happen before. Like this is not a big deal. I thought you had cancer. She's like, I've never hardly ever seen you cry except like when one of our dogs passed. And I start laughing and I was like, no, like this is that. And she's like, we'll figure it out. And so what we did is I just started saying like, this is the right move. It's the hardest decision I made, but this is the right move. And so I just kept working the field, praying for a harvest.
Right.
And I didn't quit. And every day that I got up during that time and I wanted to just mentally crawl in a hole, one, I had to remind myself, what's your brand? Right. And then the second, I continually went back to like great stories are not smooth sails. And a guy on my team that he wasn't working. We let most of our team, we had to let most of our contractors and team go just to kind of survive. And I remember one of the guys who I'm still super close with today, he was like, man, I understand the situation, but he's like, here's what I want you to remember. If you give up, you lose the ability to use this as part of your story. And he said, man, what a great chapter in your story this will be if you keep going.
I love it.
And that was kind of the reminder of like if we give up in the storms, we rob the people who we could inspire later of what's possible.
Yeah, it was rough. I did not have a good relationship with God through, most of high school, most of college, really. I call myself a Christian. Once I could drive myself, I started going to church again, but I wasn't really acting like a Christian should. It's to go to Sunday, better to ask for forgiveness than anything else, I guess. But that's not how I should have been living. And when you are choosing to listen to God only when you want to listen to God, then who's really the Lord of your life at that point?
That's a great point.
So I spent a lot of my time, especially in college, kind of doing whatever I felt like I wanted to do. I don't drink, I don't party, but it was just, it was not healthy. And going from my junior to senior year, I was in a relationship for all of my junior year that was going nowhere. And it was just, I stayed in it because it was easy, and it wasn't fair to that person. It wasn't fair to me. And I was like, I need to change something because I keep saying that I want to have a relationship with God, but I'm not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So I applied for a job as a counselor in a Christian camp. It's called Kanakuk in Branson, Missouri. And the camp changed my life. And as I'm walking through it, like I'm spending time in the Word every single day, and I'm meeting these counselors that still pour into me, and I, pour into them, and that's incredibly beneficial. Working with kids, ministering to them, it will change your life.
Yeah.
And it did. It changed mine. It changed my perspective. It changed how I decided to live after that.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of camp, still spending time in the Word every single day, every single day, every single day. Then we get the call in the middle of October that, Casey had most likely passed away. We all fly out there. It's confirmed that he's passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And, I really struggled with that as most probably would.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I struggled with that because I was like, God, I'm at the closest point in my relationship with you that I've ever been, ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even close. And now is when you decide to finally take Casey after all of the attempts. Why put us through all those attempts?
Yeah.
Like what was the point of that if eventually it was just going to happen anyways? Why didn't you just take him the first time instead of putting us through this so many times? And the response from God was, well, you're coming to me now, aren't you? Like, you would not have come to me if it had happened the first time or the second time. Like,
wow,
it would have been why would I go to a God who could have allowed something like that to happen?
Right.
For help.
Right.
But instead it was, Nick, I know the plans that I have for you. He knew I was going to work at the camp long before I did. Build the relationship with God to where I could lean on him through this.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been able to help me to be able to actually do something positive with Casey's death.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm still me, still that little weirdo, but happy in my skin.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Self-acceptance about you as a person.
That's a huge thing that no one can teach you. You've got to figure that out on your own. No one can teach you that.
What do you think was the most valuable lesson for you to get to that point for you?
That I'm not alone.
Ah.
I'm not alone. I have my family. I have my family. I have my incredible wife. I have an amazing life. And again, everything that I slogged through got me to where I am. And I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
Wake up every morning. I'm not a morning person, but I put my feet on the floor, I stretch, and I'm like, all right, let's do this.
That's beautiful. Yeah. You're grateful. Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Oh, the first word that pops to mind. Grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said for getting to that point after you've been through the things that you've been through and the low points. Yeah. Without the low points, you can't have those high points. You got that balance.
It's waves and crests.
I'd say that's a difficult question to answer because there are still times today where I wonder if I can fight back, and I think that's kind of like what I said. I feel like you always have that hole in your heart, and whether you like it or not, your life is forever changed. You view life in a different way.
Yes.
There's really nothing, no book you can read, or even therapy was very helpful for me, but it's always going to be something that has happened to you and something that you went through. And, but I think it's just been an ongoing fight for me. And I think the best answer for me, like you said, I had to move to Ann Arbor 6 months later and go to college. In many ways, I didn't want anything to do with football. I was like, football? Who cares about a game? And the amount of work and effort that it takes is sometimes I don't even know how I got through that. And, luckily for me, I had such amazing teammates and people around me. It made all the difference. But the reality for me was that football, it's like on one hand, you don't want to play it. You don't even care about it. Right. And on the other hand, football was the thing that allowed me to escape. It allowed me to be in a place where I could actually search for my passion for it again, to really dig deep and find, why did I even like football? And, you start to examine your life and think back to when your dad was spray painting the yard, and the simple aspect of it, of playing with your brothers, playing with your dad, mom's watching and your friends are coming over, whatever it may be. That's where it all started. And so you have to kind of dig deep and say, what, this is maybe something that's bigger than me. And I'm surrounded by these teammates, and even, more so, just, I think, God really got me through it. And that's a whole nother podcast episode, but I had so many reasons why I felt God was calling me to Michigan, and pretty much none of them had to do with football. And I didn't find that out till later. So
yeah, I think that's one of the most intriguing things. And I would invite everybody that's listening to this to tune into the miracle episode that we're talking about. We'll put that link as well up for when we release this podcast and this talk, because the basis for a lot of your healing, I would say, had to do and revolve around how all that I'm going to just call it a God thing that just dropped. Because with you being a higher level athlete, being recruited by numerous Division I programs, your dad and your hope was that you would go to Ohio State. That was going to be the thing to do, right? And when Michigan called, and your mom said, I think we need to probably look at this. Yeah, okay. All right, you did. It fit. Here we go. You would have no idea how pivotal that decision would be just a year down the road, 2 years down the road for you. Because without that, it would have changed the trajectory for your brother and for your entire family.
Yeah. And that, like I said, in hindsight, it had everything to do with not football. And at the time as a recruit, and it's funny, I look back on it, and but that's what makes it such a beautiful story in the end, is that when I was a recruit, I was meeting with my pastor. I was really conflicted, because the young Elliot wanted to go to Ohio State, and yet every time, there were many factors involved. Coach Tressel was awesome. His brother recruited me. It was a dream come true.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, they kind of had their offensive linemen set up. They already had their guys committed. They were nice to me and treated me great, but they were just kind of like, yeah, we like you.
Yeah.
Whereas Michigan, on the flip side, we love you. What do we have to do to get you?
Yeah.
You should only be visiting here. Don't visit any other schools. What are you doing? They were above and beyond. And on top of that, like I said, I was meeting with my pastor, and there were so many little moments that I had throughout the recruiting journey that, make no mistake, it was God speaking to me. And I got made fun of as a recruit on, the recruiting websites, because they're like, recruit says God tells him to go to Michigan. Like, this guy's,
wait,
this guy's out of his mind, kind of thing. Because I was very outspoken about it. I feel, because it was it's a big deal. Ohio State, Michigan, this whole thing. And I just said, I really feel a calling on my heart to go to Michigan. And like I said, my pastor and I would meet, and different, just all kinds of different things would happen, where it was like I would pray and God would clearly answer the prayer. And I'm like, Elliot wants to go to, for those, for those that have faith, it's like the flesh wants to go to Ohio State, but God is really calling me to go to Michigan. And on top of that, I fell in love with Ann Arbor. I fell in love with the staff and all these. But anyways, the whole point saying in all of that is there were so many reasons to go to Michigan. And as a recruit, I thought it was going to deal with football, and come to find out, it was the perfect opportunity for, simply put, my family to heal, and to give Brock an opportunity, more specifically Brock an opportunity to heal.
Yeah.
And way bigger than football. And, you can't, you can't make that up. It's like I look back and I see God's hand on it all, and I'm just like, I'm very thankful.
And later that day, I go home after work, and I'm like, you know what? I want a hamburger.
Okay.
I don't eat hamburgers very often, but I want a hamburger.
Okay.
And some onion rings.
Uh-huh.
All right, fine. So I go to a restaurant, get a hamburger and onion rings, and mind you, it's about 5:30. Okay, so it's not late at all. Okay, spend an hour eating, waiting for food, eating, watching TV, go out, hop on the bike. And I was like, you know what? I want to go see the sunset. Now it's around 6:30. Hang out by the beach courts. There's a really awesome sunset over down by the river, overlooking the bridge, what they call the Big Dam Bridge. It's the dam in Arkansas, and a bridge that goes over it.
Yes.
And I'm like, those are some really awesome sunsets there. It's very picturesque.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to, ride back before it gets dark, as the sun's going down.
Mm-hmm.
So on my way to the courts, to the parking lot of the beach volleyball courts, I passed the first light and I was like, should I go down there? Yeah, I'm going to go down there. Someone pulls out in front of me, hits the brakes. Don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Don't remember the rest. I remember swerving.
Wow. That's it.
That's it.
What do you remember? What was the next recollection you had after that?
Waking up in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Waking up in the hospital a day later, 2 days later, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. They thought I was going to, the hospital was very surprised I even woke up that early. They thought I was going to be in a coma for at least like a week.
Oh, wow, Vince.
Yeah.
Wow. What do you recall as your first thought when you woke up? We were like, holy crap, where am I? What happened?
What happened? Yeah. Did it really happen?
Okay.
And then I noticed my surroundings. I was like,
yeah,
here we are.
Yeah. So I remember hearing that the individual that wanted to start the beach volleyball with Abigail's dad. And it was like, I reached out because we had all heard that there had been something happening, and he gave me information that they couldn't, you went missing, which was unusual for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
He couldn't get in touch with you. So they knew something was up, and you were by yourself initially in the hospital.
Yeah. So we were supposed to have practice. Oh my gosh. Sometime very shortly after I wrecked.
Yeah.
Abigail texted me, Bella texted me.
Mm-hmm.
One of my adopted players texted me, Riley Melton. She plays at Coastal Carolina, and she came back home and always trained with me.
Yeah.
And the girls. It was awesome. So I kind of adopted her into the Prime family.
Yes.
And none of them could get hold of me.
Yeah.
None of them saw any posts for me. And they're like, it's odd that he didn't post within 3 days. Like, he's always posting. I'm always posting,
Yeah.
And so they couldn't get a hold of me. Parents couldn't get a hold of me. Derek couldn't get a hold of me. They're like, okay, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Derek couldn't get a hold of me, and he was like, okay, we got to figure this out. Right. And then they were going to call the cops, and then Riley's mom, Susan Melton, she's like, let me do some digging. Let me see if I can track him down. And she found out where I was. She told Derek, Abigail's dad. And then it all started to come together for them.
Yeah. Then your community surrounded you. Yeah.
Community, to say the least.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't. Beach volleyball, we all know, is a small world. Or volleyball in general is a small world. Beach volleyball, obviously, we know that it's even smaller. Yeah. And if I honestly, I did not know my place in the community at all. Like, I didn't.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the community showed up.
Yeah.
In the largest way.
Yes.
I could possibly even think. from the players that were part of my program, from the players that were part of the programs that surrounded my program, to everyone else that was, including yourself, like just a part of the community. Like it showed up in the largest way I could ever imagine. And I thank everyone for that, all the prayers, all the blessings, all the thoughts, all the texts, all of the.
Yes. It's that connection.
Yeah.
And you establish that in that foundation, like in the fact that you're in the work that you are in and how it happened and you were walking away from it and it still happened. It just tells you it's really a piece of you.
Yes. Yeah. It in essence, I thought I was just like a tumbleweed blowing in the wind. Really, I thought I was. No.
That's interesting.
It showed me that I was a little bit more than a tumbleweed blowing in the wind.
Everybody's at a different pace, and I wasn't the best in the world early on. I mean, actually, one of my teammates got all this attention, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do my thing and plug away over here. And once she was the national player of the year and everything, which was great. But once we got to college and, I was able to really come into my own and figure out, how I could help my team win a national championship or get better. And then obviously find my way on the beach as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think too that you brought up a really great point. I think for athletes that are still developing that may be discouraged about where they are and comparing themselves. I think that old adage, comparison is the thief of joy.
I love that. It's so true. And I love that quote because that's in life, right? You don't want to compare your life to another. And that's the one downside of the social media. Like I love the social media where I personally love travel. I love food.
Yes.
I love inspirational stuff. So I love Instagram for that. Right. But, the stuff where you're seeing someone else's life and it looks so great and perfect and you feel intimidated, or she looks amazing in a bikini, or she's always winning a gold medal, and that makes you feel bad about yourself. That's where I don't like it.
Yeah.
And obviously teen girls, teenagers, boys too, because I have a 13-year-old son.
Yeah.
They're insecure about their place in life and they're trying to figure it out. So confidence is so important as you grow up, and you just want to help these young athletes find that and not compare themselves to others.
Right. And know that they still have this potential inside of them and these things that if they plug into that and they buy into that. And I think too, like another thing that you said in an interview that I had seen recently was it's finding what works for you.
True.
And that like you said, also you talked about, so what's your vehicle? What are you going to use to get to where you want to be? That's a life thing too, right there that you said.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, nobody thought I could ever win a professional beach volleyball tournament. And I believed in myself. I grinded. I got in the gym. I got strong. I did extra reps. I would always watch the finals when I was a rookie on the tour and kind of see, okay, what are they doing that makes them better than me?
Yeah.
And what can I do better? And once I really attacked my weaknesses, which is something that a lot of young athletes don't want to do. They want to practice what they're good at. Yes. I always ask girls, okay, we're going to work on hitting. What side do you want to work on? They'll say right side. And I'm like, okay, then we're going to do left side.
Left side.
Because we're going to work on your weaknesses, because the stronger your weaknesses, the better your whole game.
Wow.
So I really focused on those, like whether they were a specific situation, a specific skill. How could I get better at that? And so that's how I learned to focus. And that was the recipe that worked for me.
Yeah.
And that wasn't somebody telling me that. That was me figuring that out on my own. And I feel like a lot of times these young athletes want somebody to give them the recipe, but they need to figure it out.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that process of healing for you. So when you went to college and you started seeing the psychologist there, how did all of that start to unfold for you? Where you obviously knew that there was some stuff that you needed to unload and stuff that was happening. Did you feel comfortable right away? Did it take a bit of time for you to kind of get to that point where you were like, I'm ready to dive a little deeper? Or what was that process for you?
Yeah, so it started out with me going to see that sports psych and talking about softball.
Okay.
That's how it started in my PTSD. And we kind of got into the depths of how I was anxious and I had performance anxiety. And on top of that, social anxiety. And so my sports psych was the one that originally referred me to get medication for my anxiety, which was a game changer for sure. But over that next year, I kept seeing my sports psych, but we didn't really talk about some other in-depth problems. We kind of kept it softball related.
Yeah.
But over the next year, my mental health continued to decline. I think my eating disorder kind of kicked in. That was kind of the height of it. Because of that, I was severely depressed, couldn't get up out of bed. Because I was malnourished, I tore a ligament in my arm that stopped me from pitching. So on top of all of it, I lost my only outlet. And on top of that, everything weighed on me. And I felt like I was letting everyone down and that I wasn't good enough to be here or that I was making other people in my life more miserable. And that was a very low point for me. And there was a presentation for athletes in November of my sophomore year, so about 2 years ago, where it was Tyler Helinski's story and his family speaking and how he died by suicide and how they didn't know. And after that, I had felt so alone and I had a really big breakdown. And that breakdown was my rock bottom. I told my friends and coaches that I didn't want to be here anymore. And they allowed me to take time from softball and didn't take their eyes off me. But at that rock bottom was when I was referred to the therapist that I have now.
Okay.
And so over that time, we kind of got a little bit, I was very hesitant to talk. So it wasn't, it wasn't just pouring my heart out right at the beginning. It started with just a little bit of conversation.
Right.
How are you feeling here? And I would never show emotion with therapy. And only in the past year have I started to show emotion. But I had realized over that time with all my other mental health issues that talking about PTSD was easy now.
Yeah.
I wanted other people to know how I felt. And I wanted other people to know about PTSD in athletics because the only time I've ever heard about PTSD is when we hear it in veterans.
Right. Right.
So I didn't know that I could have it. And when I was finally able to at least share that my story via social media for that first time, strictly only about PTSD, the response I had was overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was overwhelmingly positive with people just being like, random people being like, I have PTSD and you described what I was feeling perfectly. I didn't know how to describe it and that was it. And so that was the start, truly the start of my healing process. Was being able to kind of talk about it and share it and to make other people feel less alone. And in that process, I felt less alone.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's kind of where my healing process has been. And honestly, advocacy has been my healing process. Making sure other people didn't feel the way that I felt.
Yeah.
Making sure people knew about these things that I didn't know about. I think that's been really the key to my healing process alongside therapy, but in the support system for sure.
It was a gift, probably the biggest gift I've ever received because it allowed me to go into a different community. And as you know, we've grown up in Nashville our whole life. My dad has grown up there. His dad was there, so we had a long history in Nashville. And Father Ryan, obviously, that's a big upbringing. And I'm really grateful for that community that I will always have back home. But for me, I needed to branch out. I was feeling just a little stuck. And Jacksonville, Florida literally allowed me to do that. I have a completely different community down here and it's beautiful and I love it. But as I talked about getting over the hill of recruiting, I looked over the hill and there were mountains of just things that I didn't know I was even going to go through.
Yeah.
So, just looking back on the last 3 years, I wouldn't trade any of it, the good and the bad. And that's hard to say, but it's true just because there's so many lessons in it. Truly blood, sweat, and tears of just life and volleyball and not putting your identity in your sport and growing over that mountain, which I just did last year. I could just go on for days about how grateful I am. And I'm 20 minutes from the beach. So there's truly no reason to complain. I get up every morning and I'm like, I don't have anything to complain about. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida. And then just being a part of a team for the last 4 years, I think has been the biggest thing, because coming here, I didn't know a ton of people. I didn't know anyone. Like I had met my coach over FaceTime.
That was crazy for me. If we think about that, like that was a big COVID piece. Like I'm like sending my kid 10 and a half hours away from home to a school we didn't really know a lot about until March, when we really made that commitment and followed like, okay, this is what this looks like. And then you've never even met your coach in person. Like even on your visit, there was nobody on campus. We had to make sure no one was around. He couldn't see you. It was like all of these rules and stuff based on that time of our lives.
Yeah. And I think that everything happens for a reason. So for some reason, I didn't need to meet him. But yeah, I mean, the biggest blessing. It's just, and I was thinking about it last night, and I think each year of being on this team, like it's been the same coach, but the team has been different each year, and there's a lesson each year that's completely different. And I usually don't figure it out until about halfway through or after it's over. And I look back and I'm like, oh, that makes sense now.
I
so
love
that's
that.
like, it's like a nice little present each season. I'm like, what's going to happen this season? We'll see. But
oh, well, you grow in yourself and in your character by doing that too. But I love that you get that piece that you can look back and go, this was meaningful for me because of X, Y, and Z. And I can really see that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of people really get that. So I would also attribute that to being present, like, and really taking that time to sit and center yourself, even just for a couple of minutes each day. I know that sounds really kind of corny, and you probably get it just because you've experienced it. But there's something really valuable about just sitting and not doing anything for a piece of time to open up your brain, open up your experience, and open up your perspective.
Yeah. And I think I know that now because I know what chaos feels like. Because thinking back, like my sophomore year, I was trying because I was blessed my freshman year to get to play. I was one of the freshmen that played more. I got to play at conference, which was huge for me. And then coming back sophomore year, I feel like I had to fill my shoes and then fill more. So I was going out to practice early every day, which everyone was, but in the long run, it was not what we needed to be doing. And I was running my body dry of anything, any extra energy. And that's, I think, where I got into my lowest valley of just putting my identity in my sport, putting my identity in the outcome of, is Dylan going to put me on this court today? Is he going to play me this weekend? If he doesn't, I need to go out, and like, I can't sit in my room for 10 minutes. Like I should be doing more. And just obviously, like, you can always work harder, but I think there's a way to go about it and understand that, like, you have to detach from it and know that this is something I do. It's not who I am. And that was the biggest part for me. And I think that FCA really helped that, just seeing other people that had gone through that and gotten over it. And I had this one friend there, she's graduated now, but she had this mindset her senior year. And she said, I want my motto to be play free. And that's, so the last 2 years, that's been my motto. It's just play free. You know, I play this because I love it. If I don't pass the ball, great. There's 100 other balls right behind it that I get to pass, you know?
Yeah. And just like that, year one is in the books, you guys. Oh, so pumped to be able to bring you another season starting up year number 2. A week from today, our first episode drops. So excited to share this new space on the platform, The Soul Goals, complete, like I said earlier, with an amazing co-host and some great guests along the way. We'll share all of that as we begin that journey next week. Please make sure to stay tuned and to check it out. Before I go, I just want to say one more time how grateful and how hopeful I am for this platform to continue to grow, for these messages to be able to be brought to a wider audience so that we can all connect with one another, learn from one another, and grow together in our faith, in our compassion, in our grace, and in our love for our communities, for ourselves, for everyone surrounding us. being the best version of ourselves that we can possibly be. Hey, also, you know what? I love your feedback on the show. Your input on all of the episodes is really what makes this what it is. And it's so invaluable so that we're aware what it is that you want to know more about, what it is that you want to hear more of. That's, again, how we grow, by connecting. Thank you so much to all 52 of my guests that have graciously come on to tell their beautiful stories, those vulnerable messages, again, sharing so much of themselves with all of us. Such a big deal. And I'm so thankful to have been just a small part of that with them. Also, hey, I want to say thank you for passing these episodes along to friends and family that you feel they could benefit, as well as the subscribes, the downloads. Gosh, I appreciate all of that more than you ever will know. So year number 2 coming up, starting next week. But I don't ever want you to forget that everyone has a story, folks, and every story matters. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. If you have an idea for an interview or you would like to share your own story, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message at dawn@thesoulgoals.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love for you to leave a review and to consider following and subscribing to the show. With weekly releases, there is always another interesting story to be heard. I do hope that today's guests and their words have helped to bring some extra light to your day and encouraged you to find a deeper space of your very own soul goals. Until next time, friends, remember that everyone has a story, and every story matters.